Hi, my name is Georgia Vrakas, and this is Mad Poetry, Mental Illness Reimagined. Lost and found. I feel disconnected somehow. I don't know why I feel like an untethered soul, a helium balloon floating away, let go by a screaming child's too small hand. I feel not blue exactly, maybe gray, maybe teal, not shiny, not dull, not bright, not light, nothing in between, nothing. I feel as translucent as my pale skin, marred only by delicate blue-green veins, jarring, reaching towards one another, creating a map which leads us nowhere. The weight of something is on my shoulders. Is it on my chest, compressed, pressed against my heart? I can't breathe, even though my lungs have all the air they need. Inhale, exhale. I feel tired, but I don't wish to sleep. I am wide awake in my bed at night, staring at the ceiling right above me. I can't see anything. It's pitch dark, but I know what there is behind the curtain. I know what there is behind the night sky. No, not answers. That would be too easy. Life would be too easy. Questions, maybe, a cliche. Bits and flecks of truths and lies. Pieces of me wait to be collected. I try to make sense of the how and the why and the who, obviously. I try. Be as quick as you can. There is no time. The curtain is closing. There is no time. I am the curtain. I am the night sky. So, hello. Like I said, my name is Georgia Vrakas, and welcome to my podcast, Mad Poetry, Mental Illness Reimagined. A little bit about myself. I am a clinical psychologist and a university professor, and I'm also a bipolar woman. My work focuses on mental health, mental illness, and suicide prevention. And I also write poetry about these issues through the lens of my three intersecting realities: bipolarity, academia, and psychology. Because we'll touch upon these issues in this podcast, I must begin with a trigger warning regarding mental illness and suicide. If you feel any distress at all while listening to an episode, I urge you to please visit one of the websites or call one of the phone numbers that I have included in my podcast description. So the poem you just heard was written by me during a particularly difficult time in my life, where I was asking myself and others, what's wrong with me? Somebody please tell me what's wrong with me. And nobody seemed to have the answer. In this podcast, I will explore the ups and downs of mental illness with you and different ways of seeing and experiencing it. In each episode, I will be sharing discussion points on mental illness as well as one of my poems to encourage reflection on what it is to live with a mental illness, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. For me, mental illness is not an amalgam of symptoms. It is part of the human condition. This is why I wanted to do a podcast exploring that side of human experience, which is not limited to symptoms and diagnoses. You may be wondering why poetry in a podcast about mental illness. Well, there are many poets who have lived with mental illnesses, such as Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, Emilien Ligon, among many, many others. Poetry offers us valuable insights and perspectives on living with a mental illness. And I hope my poetry will be able to contribute even a little to scripts of knowledge. On a personal level, poetry is a way for me to express myself on everyday realities of my mental illness journey that goes, again, far beyond symptoms and diagnoses. It is also about the collective experience of people living with a mental illness. Unfortunately, mental illness is often associated with harsh realities and ugliness such as stigmatization, discrimination, and on top of that, the media often associates violent crime to mental illness, thus furthering the stigma. But there is also beauty in mental illness, even though it may not seem so at first glance. The poetry I read and the poetry that I write is a balm that has guided me in my reconstruction process. It has helped ground me by putting pen to paper and quieting my mind. I hope my podcast resonates with you and helps quiet your mind. In this first episode entitled What is Wrong with Me?, I explore that in-between space, the time from when you start feeling mentally unwell to the moment you finally understand what is happening to you. When I was 23, my father died suddenly. Something broke inside of me, and my grief was overwhelming. If you have lost a parent, you most probably understand how I felt then. However, at the time, I acted like I was okay and kept on trekking forward. But I wasn't okay at all. I crashed and burned, and when I turned 25, I saw my family doctor, who diagnosed me with major depressive episode and prescribed antidepressants. It really did work. Until it didn't. So we changed medication, and then we tried again and again and again and again. Nothing was working. It was a very difficult time for me. I was suffering a lot. I even had suicidal thoughts, and I even had to go to the ER a couple of times. Needless to say, the treatments were not working. And I found out why 20 years later when I was told I have bipolar disorder type 2 and received new treatment. Even though not everything was magically resolved, and I am still reconstructing myself into something that makes sense for me, I felt relieved because things were starting to make sense finally. It's like the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Most mental illnesses have a genetic hereditary component. So our symptoms are interpreted as manifestations of the illness and a focus of the treatment. However, mental illnesses also have an important environmental component. For example, like childhood trauma. This is not born of the individual, but something that happens to them. Symptoms are manifestation of the deep suffering we carry. Sometimes they're coping skills we developed that we needed to survive childhood trauma. Although they were essential at the time for us to survive, they are no longer useful and even may have become detrimental to our everyday lives. I think it's important to consider the person as a whole, to get to the root cause of their suffering. Allow them the space to tell their stories, to tell us as clinicians what happened to them. The question is not, what is wrong with me, but what happened to me. As a clinician myself, in front of me is the expert. The patient is the expert of their illness. So how they perceive it, how they understand it, how they live it. Their telling of their lived experience is what helps me understand how I can help them. Some people with mental illness don't identify as being mentally ill. Their illness is one of many parts of their life. Others reject the label completely. Others consider themselves as survivors of the psychiatric system. And others identify themselves as mad. Of course, you can be in more than one category or none of these categories. This is what lived experience is. I like the concept of mad, as you saw in the title of my podcast. It refers to many things, but I like the idea that it is about reclaiming one's identity from the one imposed by psychiatry. It is a way of knowing. It is self-affirmative and empowering. I personally identify as bipolar. It makes sense to me, but I am also mad to an extent because I see some mad in me. This is a controversial subject for most working in the mental health industry and for people in general. It is confronting. What do you think about all of this? I would really like to hear your thoughts. So if you want, you can send me an email at themadpoetrypodcast@gmail.com, themadpoetrypodcast@gmail.com. I would really love to hear your opinion and your thoughts on this. If you wish to know more about madness, I have included links to a couple of references in this episode's description. Well, here we are at the end of the first episode of Mad Poetry, Mental Illness Reimagined. Thank you very much for joining me on this first episode. Thank you for listening to my poem. It is a big privilege for me. If you do have any questions, if you want to learn more, if you have questions about the episode, please write to me at the email address that's written in my podcast description. I cannot give psychological advice specifically, but I can answer your questions about mental health, mental illness, psychology, etc. Finally, I must reiterate, if you are suicidal, please call 988. This is a number for Canada and the US. And to find a helpline in your country, if you're outside Canada and the US, please visit the International Association of Suicide Prevention. Their website is on my podcast cover page. Please join me next time when I will be talking about mental health, mental illness, and mad poetry. Until then, take good care.